Smile.
Smile. Smile. Smile. Smile. Smile. Smile.
It gets better.
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 It gets better. Because there's so much infinite love everywhere. Smile. It gets better. The extraordinaire. No, literally, like, you are so admirable, and I am just super elated to have you here, and like, I'm just honored.
I'm flattered.
You know, seriously.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, because I mean, I've known you for a little second now, and I've seen your ambitious like journey, and like all of the things that I know that you're going through behind the scenes is so interesting. And then just knowing that you have made strides and you've gotten things done.
Yeah.
Okay, over the years, and I've seen that because I remember. Tunde. I remember working at Alamo.
I remember standing outside of Webster Hall and meeting you for the first time.
Oh my God.
And trying to get into one of your parties. And you didn't know me from a can of tuna. And you were like, have you been inside yet? And I'm like, nah, I was trying to like find out how I could get a ticket. She said, no, just come inside. And that's literally how we met.
Yeah.
And that energy has been the same ever since.
That is so insane because I didn't even throw it back that far because oh my God.
It's been at least 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Those Webster Hall parties were legendary.
Absolutely.
We really took over Thursday nights in New York.
2 years ago.
Yeah. And that's when I really remember, I remember sitting with you, and I think this is what sticks in my mind about you, Tunde. We sat on the couch at Alamo Records, and you ran this whole Afrobeats thing to me. Mm-hmm. And you were just so adamant about it. Mm-hmm. And you were like, no one's listening. Let's get Afrobeats into Alamo. Let's integrate. Afrobeats. And I'm like, I believe in this. I know he knows what he's talking about. But where are we going to get the support? Where are we going to get the people behind us? How is this going to happen? And then I was in a space where I just started working at Alamo, and I was like, how do I introduce this here? And so, but it was so insane to see down the line that you end up taking Afrobeats to another level and implementing a program, in the corporate space that took off.
Well, that's great that you bring that up, because I even forget about that time, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that was a time where I was working at a talent agency, and I was trying to get a lot of these African artists like representation outside of the African continent. And a lot of these organizations, when they're green in certain spaces, especially when it comes to things that Black people are doing, they like to see other people find success in it before they jump in or take the risk to like support it. Mm-hmm. There's also this widespread notion that Black people don't spend money at a lot of these places. So rather than actually take the time to invest in these things, they'd rather let somebody else do it and track their successes and failures and then move forward in that regard. At that time, I had sat with Todd to try to see if we could, really represent Afrobeats in the United States market. And he was interested, and we did talk about a few different projects that would have made sense as far as remixes are concerned, but I don't think that there was enough support internally. I don't think that he had the right players in play to really push the music to the potential he knew it deserved to move at that point. So now you see other labels like Empire that have kind of taken that notion and run with it and have full rosters of artists that represent that music now. I think if Todd and Kevin and them at that point would have like really given it a shot, I think they would have been sharing a lot of that success.
Right, and at least just taking that first step.
For sure. I get it. It's a business, right? So a lot of people are averse to risk. So I can't fault them for running the business the way they run the business. But at the end of the day, like, it didn't stop me from taking the ideas and the vision that I had and finding a team that was ready to, invest any which way they did.
Sweat equity, monetarily. And so what was the next step after that? Because you're getting these doors, not necessarily slammed in your face, but people are not really willing to open these doors. So what was the next step for you?
Oh, yeah. I've essentially been consulting with artists and labels, not just African music, but music in general for the past like 10, 15 years. So after that experience, I was like, maybe it just makes sense for me to go back to, consulting for artists and helping labels at least understand the nuances of African culture so they can start to feel more comfortable investing on the continent and in the diasporas when it comes to African and Caribbean music. And I think the opportunity to join the last organization I was a part of kind of came out of, a friend of mine left that organization, and when they were looking for somebody to kind of take over his responsibilities and kind of expand the vision, my name came up. And at first I was a little hesitant because I had just gone through a loss and I was like recovering emotionally from that. And, I have social anxiety, so I'm always really anxious about going into new environments without having a full understanding of how those environments operate. I know everybody's talking about social anxiety now because of Summer Walker and how she's dealing with it and things like that, but it's a real thing. I've learned how to kind of manage it over the years, but at that time I was like, I didn't know how I would have felt going into an organization that big after consulting comfortably and financially comfortably, emotionally comfortably for so long. So the idea of me stepping out of that that comfort that I became used to and going into an organization where I had to conform to someone else's rules and someone else's culture, it was kind of scary to me. But after some time, I gave it a shot. I joined the organization, and initially it was an amazing time. I was given, a lot of opportunity to connect with a lot of wonderful people internally, a lot of people that took risks and gave us a chance to really succeed. And when you do meet those type of people, you have to you initially are immediately thankful because you know that in your experience, you don't always get that lucky to step into an organization and meet people that are aligned with you, whether they look like you or don't, whether they share your culture or don't. Some people are just open to learn, and that's what the most important thing is, right? People that are actually malleable and willing to learn and grow with you.
Right.
And that was the situation for the initial part of my tenure. And then, after a while, organizations go through things and people leave, new people come, there's regime change and things like that. And you start to see a deprioritization in what you were hired to do. And, I don't really let little things like that stop me from, moving forward in the vision that I have. But it was incredibly difficult to try and find support internally after some of those changes happened. And eventually, after being there for about a year, my mom passed. And when she passed, I was expecting some support emotionally, or at least some sort of humanity from that organization. Didn't receive it. And in the end, the decision was made for me to depart. And ever since, I've been in a really, really free mind state where I could really focus on myself and prepare myself for the next opportunity. And it's going to be interesting to join another organization or do it independently and continue the vision that I was brought to the last organization to do.
Right.
And actually have the support and the means to continue to empower creators and help them with their vision.
Yeah, because essentially you built a tribe within this organization, and you had, people to fall back on and people to swap ideas with. And,
and I didn't do it alone.
Bounce off of.
I didn't do it alone.
I was gonna say.
I've always believed in team effort.
Yeah.
I've always worked with people, and I've always been lucky enough to find people within organizations that can amplify a vision, right? So I was fortunate enough to have a team of people in the former organization that really believed in what I was trying to do and worked with me when we collaborated on everything to get things done. But with a lot of that stuff, you need bread. So if you don't have internal support financially, there's no budgets that are going towards the initiatives that, you're responsible for, it can get a little complicated. So, I know I'm not the only person, especially I'm not the only Black person that's gone through a similar experience. So I'm learning now that it's more of a familiar experience than I thought it was across the tech industry, corporate industry. It is what it is. So a lot of people choose to fall in line, and it is,
it just is what it is.
It is what it is.
And I mean, all you can do is at this point is just roll with the punches, but staying true to yourself, because at the end of the day, I never saw you as a person that could easily be controlled
No.
by optics, by systematic structures. I never saw it. I was like, he is strong. He's got it in the bag. He knows what he's talking about. He's not going to accept less than what he deserves. And so, like, I honestly commend you for making that decision, because some people, it's hard to transition from, like, that comfortable, you know, cubicle. It's hard to transition, especially when you're under an organization that is just so not profound, but just very well known and very magnanimous. And so now you're transitioning into this, like, now are you like self-employed? Is that what you're doing? Are you soul searching? Are you, we're putting you in right now?
So it's interesting because when I first got into the industry, I was like, what, 13 years old? So
Yeah.
I've always kind of considered myself as an
13.
entrepreneur. I was always an entrepreneur in my head. I was a music producer when I was 13.
Wow.
So, and I come from a line of entrepreneurial spirits. My mother, God rest her soul, entrepreneurial spirit, but also, you know, managed an entire mental health care facility, also managed a catering business, also, my mom did so many different things while also holding mad degrees for various things. My father, also entrepreneurial spirit, but is also a finance executive. So it's like, I've always been surrounded by very proud Africans who have entrepreneurial mindsets, but also were able to maintain corporate positions their
Right.
entire careers. So I never really had an excuse not to go after what I wanted. But I also understood the value of being in rooms on the corporate side where there's not a lot of people like you that look like you who are in there
Right.
trying to affect positive change. So I can look at any part of my career and see where I was the only person that looked like me or that represented a certain culture that was in a room when a decision was made that could have went completely left if I wasn't in that room. Or I had the sensitivity and the nuance to know, okay, we can pull an affiliate or a friend of mine that has more expertise in this space to be a point of reference so that decisions are made that are conscious.
Right.
So I've always tried to be that person because I don't care if it really benefits me, but I want to make sure that whatever I'm a part of is done to the best of its ability. And even if it doesn't benefit me, how can I help someone else? That's how I was raised.
Yeah.
So even as a music producer, like, I was initially introduced to the game by someone that, you know, he didn't have to help me, but he was from my city and he worked with some of the biggest artists at that time. And he plucked little old me out of a guitar center and put me in studios with people that I had been seeing on 106 in Park for all of that, you know, that time period. And it was through those experiences that I got to meet people like Tim or Pharrell or Swiss and all those other individuals who were popping that were super huge at that time.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't blow up as a super producer, I was still given opportunities to ghost produce and ghost write and things like that that helped me understand the life of an artist, because these things are still happening. There's still artists that you'll never hear about that have penned some of the greatest records you've heard or you're hearing on the radio right now, or some of the greatest producers that you'll never see by name because they either didn't keep the rights to their song or they decided that they wanted to do a work for hire situation and, you know, sold the rights to their song before they had any chance of getting credit to it. So I've seen all of these things play out through my entire career. And when you've experienced that so early on in your career, part of you wants to understand, okay, what's the flip side of being creative? What's the business side like? So that's what I did. I initially wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. So my first job outside of entrepreneurship was I was studying to be a paralegal, and then the plan was to go to Tufts to become a lawyer. And once I started reading those torts books, man, I was like, nah, this is not what I want to do. And I started to research a lot of cases where it was clear that the disadvantaged artist that didn't have the super high-powered lawyer or high-profile lawyer usually didn't win his cases. So it just went against what I stand for, helping creators, right? So I was like, okay, I could easily spend the next 10 years of my life pursuing this and making mad bread and doing whatever, or I could find something else that could actually help me empower artists and empower creators around me. So that's what I did. I stepped back, went to school for computer science, did that, left, and then consulted for a bunch of different labels that I had relationships with as a music producer in the digital space. So when everybody was learning how to code MySpace and becoming, you know, super HTML friendly and all that stuff, I was on the flip side teaching companies how to be growth hackers and conquer things like Friendster and Facebook and other social media networks like that, and Twitter when it was, still. This is before Black Twitter was a thing.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
when it's still finding its legs.
Yeah. So this is back when Joe Budden was the king of Twitter.
I gotta remember that.
Oh yeah. Great times.
Oh
Great
my
times.
God.
Great times. So I was the one that, when people would get locked out of their accounts, they would DM me or they would call me and be like, "Yo, this is happening," and I would teach them how to fix things. I was the nerdy hacker guy that happened to have the relationships in the business.
Fire.
No, but that's what I was doing. So I always found a way to
Yeah.
be of service to people in the business, which is
Right.
why every step of my career I've always kind of had avenues to be involved with these same individuals. So at that same token, I was doing the digital strategy. I was producing music for fun. I was learning more about African culture because my parents, I was going back to Africa every few summers that I could. And then I had the opportunity to meet a lot of bloggers at that time because, Tumblr had become a thing and
Yeah.
WordPress, everybody was learning how to make their own blogs and stuff. So through that and social media, everybody connecting on social media at that time, I met Combat Jack. And Combat Jack ended up becoming a very, very good mentor, a very close friend, and someone I considered a big brother. And there was a lot of things about the music business that I thought I knew because I'd read all the books and I'd been in it, and I was an artist and I was a producer, and then I stepped away and I wanted to do the law thing. But he was actually a lawyer. He was actually an entertainment lawyer. So he was teaching me things that I didn't even understand about my own stuff. And through talking to him, I was able to get a lot of my stuff out of like a weird place, like a lot of legal stuff with some of my work and get my paperwork in order. So through those types of interactions, we had formed a bond, and he knew I was young and hungry, and I understood things that he always would laugh about and say it was an age thing, but for what he was trying to do, I always found it so fascinating that he was in such a lane that nobody else could touch. Like he started his own blog, which I was a fan of and didn't know he was behind it. And then years after he started the podcast, I told him about the blog that I'd been following, blah, blah. He was like, that's my blog, right? And I never pieced it together. And it was just about like different things that were happening in the music business.
I followed that blog.
Yeah. So I didn't know
love
it was him. So that was just one of those things where I was like, see, so he taught me that you can be honest and be transparent about your experiences. You just have to be smart about how you do it. So it was through that friendship and through that mentorship that I learned some of the smartest career choices, career advice and life advice, how to deal with, microaggressions in corporate, how to deal with, shitty friends, how to deal with, complicated family matters, how to deal with emotional stuff, how to deal with just like everything. And just how to navigate as a young black man in this business. I think that was that. And then when he suddenly passed, that was one of the toughest moments for me because my father and I are close, but my dad doesn't really understand entertainment. He's a finance guy.
Right.
Doesn't really.
Numbers.
He's not
Statistics,
creative.
Data. Analytics.
My dad is like being in a corporate building all the time. So my mother and I were always much more close because she was the one that had more of the creative entrepreneurial brain, and a lot of the ideas that I had, I would bounce them off of her and so forth. But when I met Combat, it was the first time that a male figure in that same generation had similar tastes, similar interests, similar visions, values that pertain to the creative side of my brain, which is why we connected so crazy. So when he passed, it was a shock. It was like losing your driver's license and not knowing how to navigate anymore, right? I started to what's the word when you start to question your own decisions because you're not sure if you're capable of doing them anymore.
Just like what? Like all I can think is self-doubt. I can't think of anything else.
I can't remember the word, but it's like
Yeah.
you start to second guess yourself.
Second guess it. Okay.
Yeah, it's like I started doing a lot of that, and it put me in a really weird place because for someone that had, everyone in my circle kind of saw me as the person that always had a solution for stuff. And that was like the first time in my adult life where I feel like I don't have the answer
I
for
don't
this.
have the answers. Mm-hmm.
And it shook me to my core, and I really had to really examine how to move forward. That was the first time I ever had an issue with like a panic attack. First time I ever went to the hospital for exhaustion. Like all that was happening around the same time because I was just like lost trying to figure out things. And I was also going through a change in career because I had worked at an advertising agency around that time, just trying to like understand that business and understand how those types of industries work. So I was going through a transitionary period where I was going from the advertising side of the business to a talent agency to understand booking and all these other different things.
Right.
I figured the more you knew about the entire music business, the less that anybody could flex on you, or the less that anybody could just feed you bullshit if you're trying to empower yourself or whatever. So did that, worked for the talent agency, and it was right after my switch that he had passed. So it was tough, man.
But what was that like, having all of that? Did you feel like there was so much pressure on you because you said that everyone on the outside was so used to Tunde being this strong figure? He has the answers, he has whatever. How was that like? Did you cut that line of support that you were giving out to everybody else and was kind of like, let me just step back and take time for myself? Or did you keep showing up?
It was a mixture of both. I think in the initial time, I was still showing up. And I think that messed me up more because I was still putting on a front that I was okay. And it's all I knew. Like, I grew up in a very, very Nigerian African household. And when things are bad, you never let the outside world know that things are bad. It's just how I was raised. So I was almost like tricking my own brain into saying everything is fine, everything is okay. But things were not okay. Things were not fine. And the people closest to me could see it because they know me.
Right.
But the outside world, those that have seen viral content of mine on social media, those that, fuck ISIS, I'm from Brooklyn, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Legendary. All those people think everything's okay because when they would see me out, I'm still smiling, I'm still having a good time.
Yeah.
But the people close to me knew that something was off. So I was actually recommended therapy from Combat before he passed, but I was like, I don't need therapy. My mom's in mental health. I'm like, oh, she ain't tell me nothing's wrong, everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
Why? Why did you see therapy as weakness?
I did, and again, there's certain people in my life that when they say stuff, I just do it. But my mom was always like, if you really think you need it, go get it. And I was like, I'm fine. I think she was always trying to like hint that you should do this, but until she was like, you should go see a therapist. That was when I was like, you know what, okay. But it was right after he passed that I sunk into like this really, really dark place. And my mom was like, you should go see a therapist. And I was like, okay. But it took all of that to happen for me to finally accept everybody that knew me to really put my, I know it all ego to the side and really go seek help. And it definitely helped. I think because I decided to accept defeat in the initial stage.
No, I get it.
I was broken down completely, but I was able to build myself back up, which was the most important part.
That's the beauty of it.
So that prepared me for everything I experienced at that talent agency, and it taught me how to move. I'm much more appreciative of life now more than ever before. And even with my mom's recent passing now, it's just like there's so many things that I have learned by experiencing her that I'm excited for everything that's about to happen.
They're about to happen for you.
So I'm very excited.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because the only person that was stopping me from really doing what I need to do was me.
Right. At the end of the day, stepping out, I was just telling you that before we even turned the cameras on. I was literally saying, like, I was standing in my own way and 100%. Not being able to look over myself and doubting myself before the world could even doubt me. And it was like, why am I implementing all of this stress and this pain and, all of this stuff on me before anyone else even has the chance to? And so when you reached that moment where you were self-reflective and you were like, boop, maybe it is just me.
Yeah.
What did you do next?
I had to learn how to let go of trying to control things that are beyond my control. And once I came to that realization, things became so much easier for me.
Yeah.
I'm a perfectionist by nature. It's because of the household I grew up in. Everybody in my house, everybody in my family, perfectionist. And perfection is stress. I honestly believe that's part of what led to my mother's sudden departure. I think she just was trying to do so much at one time. And no matter how many times you tell someone to slow down or chill, if they have it in their mind that they always have to
be busy, moving,
moving at all
active.
times, not sleeping, you know, not keeping their own self care in check, and you know, not allowing themselves to breathe, not allowing themselves to feel. You know, it takes a toll on you. You may not see it externally, but it takes a toll on you.
Yeah.
And I think that I've become more hyper aware of these types of things, which is why I put peace over everything else, man. I feel like it's taxing to care about so many things that are beyond your control. But for a lot of us, that's all we know, right? So you have to kind of unlearn that and just, like Jay says, don't go with the flow, be the flow.
Be the flow.
Right?
Exactly. And I feel like you're maneuvering in a world where, as a black man, you're not just worrying about your life and what's going on, right? Because you're looking out there and you're seeing black men get killed every day, or have their emotions ignored and invalidated, and having, the black man is not revered as much. And so, you guys have to think about X, Y, and Z, because when you walk out your door, there's like 20 things working against you. It's
Absolutely.
like a battlefield every single day when you're walking outside that house. What do you do to prepare before you walk out of the house, or as soon as you wake up in the morning? Do you have a routine? Do you have a mantra that you're saying to yourself? Is there a cup of tea and certain tea that you're drinking? What are you doing as soon as you wake up and when you're walking out the house to prepare yourself for this battlefield?
I come from a very spiritual family. And when I say spiritual, I don't just mean Christian.
Yeah.
But my African family is very, very aware of energy and energy transference, and how you manifest things with your mouth, and all of that. So when I wake up in the morning, prayer. Before I go to bed, prayer. I think that people are very reckless with their mouths, and I don't think that people really check what comes out of their mouth until it's too late. And I'm guilty of that too. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm definitely not. But there's times where I've said things out of anger or just like carelessly that they happen. I'm like, shit, that was me. I did that. Like a moment where I could have just held my tongue and just been like, you know what, I'm mad now, I'm upset now, let me keep my emotions in check and revisit this tomorrow and see if I still feel this way. So I've had to come to terms with that as well. It's like, I know the power of my tongue, and that's why I'm very, very careful to not speak out of turn and listen more than I talk. I think most of the people that know me intimately know that if I'm talking about it, it's because I really believe it, and I also know that my voice can be useful in this space. I don't just talk to talk. At least I try not to.
Right.
And I don't feel like that's something that people really care too much about in 2019. I think people just kind of spew their own opinions just so they can be heard.
Heard, right.
And I wasn't raised to be that way.
Yeah, and I don't get that from you. And I know that this is a really sensitive topic, but it seems that you talk about her so fluently, and I love that, because a lot of men, especially black men, they're taught to suppress these emotional feelings and don't talk about the things that hurt you because you're gonna look weak and whatever. But it seems that you've taken your mother's passing and have transformed it into this ball of fuel. And then also it's beyond a passing. I don't really know how to put words to it, but you found ways to make it relative to you and your path and what you're doing.
Sure.
And so you're able to use her as these examples in different spaces. And it just happened. So it's like, how are you able, where are you getting that from, that you can talk about this so fluently?
So I think the women in my life have always been the most important to me. So I've always had a very strong relationship with women in my life in general. My mother comes from a very, very big family, all strong women, all very alpha type women. But my mom was probably the most submissive out of all of her relations. So I got to see that dynamic play out in real time all the time. So yeah, basically a lot of the basically everything that I've done, everything that I do is a response to my mother's encouragement.
Right.
She was always super supportive of my creative side. When I showed interest in making music as a kid, she was the one that was taking me to piano lessons. She was the one that was making sure that I could get to the concert that I wanted to go to. The first concert I ever went to was a Puff Daddy and the Family Notorious B.I.G. concert in New Haven as a kid, and she took me, even though people were getting shot and stuff. She knew all that stuff, but she was like, if he's passionate about this artist, whatever, like she didn't care that it was 18. She was like, if he wants to he wants to be a part of this, boom. I don't understand any of it, but this is what he's passionate about. Cool, I'll bring him. She brought me. So it was those type of experiences that really shaped our relationship, and she would put her life on the line for me, and I honestly feel like she did. So her passing doesn't make me feel like much has changed, aside from the fact that I can't pick up the phone and call her, right? But I can still pray and meditate and sleep and dream and communicate with her that way. And I don't necessarily feel like she's left. When I get sad because I can't. It's like more of a selfishness. It's like, damn, I miss being able to call her. I miss being able to fly home and see her. Damn, I miss, those random text messages, those really goofy text messages. I miss. It's like the little things, right, that you don't really think about because you have them all the time.
Right. And
then when they stop, it shocks you. Right. It's like the little minuscule things that you don't even think about. So don't get me wrong, like there's definitely been moments where I've checked out completely and didn't want to talk to nobody. I spent a month and didn't talk to nobody immediately after. I dipped off and just like spent time with family and focused on myself. But it comes in waves. I'm not saying that I'm fully. You'll never get over it. I'll never get over it. But at least I've learned, and I'm still learning how to cope with what has happened and to understand that, she would be upset if I was upset that she passed. Right. Everything that I've done up to this point is to make her proud. And the last conversation we had, I didn't know that was the last conversation we're gonna have, but she was telling me how proud she was of everything I was doing, and it's just those little things, that you still think of. It's like we ended on the most positive note that a child could ask for.
That is amazing. Wow.
Yeah, and I have siblings too, so I always tell them, it's like the last conversation I had with mom, she was saying how proud she was of all of us, and it's kind of eerie to think about. It's almost like she kind of knew. Yeah. And it was sudden. It wasn't that she was sick. It wasn't that anything was wrong necessarily. It's just it was a very sudden accident, and you just, when God calls you home, that's your time. You can't really control that. So I'm learning how to deal with it.
Are you proud of yourself?
I try to be as grateful as possible of all of the accomplishments that I've had, and I'm happy that I'm able to make people around me happy for what I've done. Right. The work speaks for itself. I don't really relish in my accomplishments, but I'm happy that if anything I can do can help someone else, that's what gives me my own joy, Right. 'Cause at the end of the day, I'm cool, regardless whether I'm able to do something for somebody else or not. But my fulfillment comes from helping others.
Right.
And it's, in anything that I'm doing. So I'm very service-driven and purpose-driven. So.
And this is one of my favorite questions that someone from the production team said that I should ask. What is the title of this chapter of your life right now?
The Reset.
That's fire.
Sometimes you think you have everything figured out, and then God reminds you that He can hit that reset button at any time. And is it gonna break you, or is it gonna push you to adapt and move forward and continue adding more chapters to that book you call life? So I'm at like the third act, and this is that reset point where it's like, okay, cool, like things were a little crazy. You didn't really understand what was going on. So boom, here's that reset button. So now you can move forward without any
And
confusion
just
about
it. Right, and rebuild
correct.
it the way that you want.
Because so much has happened in the last few months that if you would have asked me this question 6 months ago, I'd have been like, I don't know what God's trying to tell me right now, but shit's confusing as hell, and all that's gone now. I mean, with growth comes loss.
Oh my God, yes. And you talk about community a lot, which I really, really love.
I get that from her.
Yeah, and I want to know, what is Tunde going to do for community, and what community are you targeting? Because I know people are always like, I want to save the world, and I get it, but you have to start with the person next to you. You know what I mean? So what's community for you right now? What community are you targeting, and what are you going to implement? What are you going to do? How are you touching?
Got it. So what I can say is I've spent the majority of my career trying to help creators empower themselves and earn a livable wage, you know, understand the business enough so they can protect themselves and provide themselves with cushion for their families. That is kind of what I've been focused on, but I think now I've reached the point in my career where I know I can do a lot more,
Right.
thanks to the access and the influence and things that I've been afforded. There are initiatives that I've embarked on, nonprofits and things like that, consulting with a bunch of different nonprofits and working with local governments back in Africa to try and navigate a lot of issues that are infrastructural and are social issues.
Yeah.
Using the knowledge that I've attained, in my journey. So I often go back to Africa and meet with people that are actually trying to fix things, and it's not like anywhere else in the world where capitalism kind of puts a damper on a lot of those initiatives. But just because there's more of a chance for it to fail is not an excuse to stop. So I have done my best to work with organizations that are focused on things like mental health, environmental change, social impact, community. I think those are the things that I'm very, very passionate about, aside from music. So I can't speak too much because there are things that I have signed NDAs about. We've talked.
Yeah.
But I will be very, very active in the next few years in those initiatives, as well as whatever I decide to do next with the music thing.
And are you targeting the youth, or are you targeting
I think
everyone?
so my primary target are young people, because it's easier to shape a young person's mind than it is to shape an older person's mind. A young person's more susceptible to be, molded. And then secondary audience would be for young adults, people that are eligible to vote, people that are trying to figure out, they're like in this happy stage between, graduated college, but may be starting a family, maybe just got married. That's like the sweet spot for the secondary audience, because those are the ones that are now dealing with quarter life crises. They're the ones that are figuring out how to navigate. They may have had a circle of friends growing up that is no longer their friend. They're learning how to navigate life things for the first time, some of them, after being under the cushion of their parents for all of their adolescence. So that's the secondary audience. And these are the two audiences that deal the most with depression and anxiety and things like that. A lot of them have this PTSD just because they're Black, and they don't know they have it because they think that it's normal. But then you get those same people that when they're taken out of that environment and put in a new environment, and they realize, oh, I'm actually damaged as hell, but there's really nothing that they can use as a resource to help rehabilitate. I think that's why I've chosen those two audiences to focus on. Yeah. Initially, it was just artists, because I've dealt with a lot of creators and artists, and I know that they need this desperately, but a lot of them don't even want it. And a lot of them aren't ready for it, because everybody's like therapy, but therapy can hurt if you're not in a receiving position for it. It can do more damage than good. Like, the person has to want it before it can ever be effective, because what therapy does is it literally breaks you down to your core. It literally destroys you until you are at your rawest form, and then it's up to you to decide if you want to build yourself back up again.
Oh my God, that's so real.
So I think that's the part of therapy that nobody really talks about. Yeah. I feel like it's like a cool buzzword now, mental health. But a lot of people start therapy and end up more damaged than they were before they started because they're not ready to have all of the facts thrown in their face about themselves. You know, there's a lot of people that have maintained a facade about who they are or who they've projected themselves to be for the majority of their entire lives. So when you strip them down to their core, a lot of them aren't ready for that.
Are you one of those people?
I was, absolutely. I think I was that person when combat passed. I was definitely that person, and that's probably why I had my bout with the panic attacks and stuff, because I immediately started to feel like, oh shit, am I even like who I think I am? Like, am I supposed to be in this room? Like, you start to self-doubt because the people that you become used to giving you that reassurance and that, you know, that batter in your back to keep going, the people checking on you every few weeks, yo, how you doing, bro, bro, bro? When that stops, some people don't know how to navigate after that. And I was one of those people. I became comfortable with a routine, and once that routine changed, it threw me off completely. So now, with my mom's passing, that routine again has now shifted. You know, every few days we would have check-in calls and stuff. I've now become used to not getting those calls. Every Sunday we would have a conversation, a full hour or 2 hour conversation. We're just breaking down different things going on our sides, you know, and I've had to learn how to get that energy from other people, like my grandmother or my aunts, you know, like just learning how to redistribute those energies so that I can receive them properly. I didn't know how to do that when I lost combat.
Yeah.
So I think through therapy I've learned how to like not question the universe, but also ask the universe for what I need, and that way when it comes, I know how to receive it.
Exactly.
Because a lot of people ask for things, and when they get it, they don't know how to manage it.
They don't even know how to maneuver. They don't know what to do with it.
So I'm learning how to not just ask for things, but know how to properly receive them.
I feel like what I really want to know as well is like, have you ever been in a space, and this is just in your career or working under one of these organizations, where you did have to compromise your morality, or you did have to make decisions that weren't consciously beneficial to the community, the people, whatever, and you just had to go with the flow and had to just roll with the punches?
Absolutely.
And what did that do for you? Did that ever like alter your psyche or make you feel any kind of regret or guilt? Or was it just like you kind of looked up and was like, well, it's their fault because I work under this organization? Or did you take it personally?
So it's happened a few times in my career, and it was earlier in my career when I didn't really think I didn't really have any experience enough to know that I could say no.
Yeah.
So when I was strictly doing the music thing and I was producing records for some artists that I won't name now, but it was a lot of music that I personally didn't agree with, a lot of music that literally I was against it, but because the checks were so amazing, I went against my moral code and still worked on some of these records. And in the moment you're like, well, I mean, everybody's doing a job they don't like, that, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was different in my own case, because I was helping to put out content that was negatively impacting kids, teenagers, whatever, like messing up their psyche and having them believe these really foul things about themselves and about the culture and women and all these things. And I thought it was okay because everybody's doing it, right? Everybody's listening to the music on the radio anyway. But I had a moment with my mom again where she was like, you know, you have to, at the end of the day, you're the one that's gonna have to go home at night and be okay with what you're doing. And it was that conversation that, you know, amongst other conversations, that led to me deciding to step away from that for a while until I knew that I could work on music that was more aligned with my personal values and stuff. And with the Afro stuff, that's kind of how that journey began. I had kind of pivoted from making pop and urban and R&B and was like, what art can I create that is more true to myself? So when I made that pivot, literally every door that I thought I was not so sure about opened up, because I didn't realize that there was a burgeoning wave of that music crossing over internationally at that moment. And again, when God wants to show you something, he'll use a weird way of doing it. But literally, if I
Yes.
didn't pivot at that moment, I would have went the way of a lot of producers that, were very, very relevant in 2011, 2012, and you do not see them on the charts at
Or
all
hear
anymore.
about them at all.
I would have gone that way because that way was so prevalent back then,
Yeah.
and it's obsolete now.
Right.
None of that music is on the radio anymore. And I would have been typecast as that person because I was being set up to become like that producer, and thank goodness I decided to follow my gut.
And just go a different route.
First instance. Second instance, when I was in the advertising industry, one of our main clients were spirits brands, alcohol brands. Now, I socially drink, but the way that I was being asked and tasked to develop campaigns and market campaigns to African Americans, especially in communities that are lower income, things like that, it didn't sit well with me either because I'm thinking, here are these companies that are making hundreds of millions of dollars a year by literally poisoning these communities and destabilizing families and causing people to develop alcoholism and things like that. But they're paying a nice check. So I'm young. If I'm not the only person here that's making this decision to do it, nothing wrong. Boom, boom, boom. And then someone close to me passed away from alcoholism. And then another person that I knew had an accident drunk driving. So it was like back. I was like, okay, God, what are you trying to tell me, right? And I just kept experiencing things that were like, okay, you need to step away from this. This is not where your path is supposed to be leading you to.
Yeah.
This is not what your calling is. Your calling is not to promote people drinking themselves into a stupor. Now, everybody indulges, and again, not perfect. I indulge in a drink. I'll probably get a drink tonight, but consuming and promoting are completely different things, right? And I think that people get lost in the judgment of, oh, well, nobody can judge me. Yeah, but I mean, you shouldn't wait for somebody to judge you for you to know that something's right or wrong.
Right, exactly.
Right? So nobody was judging me when I was pushing alcohol because everybody drinks. But I personally didn't feel comfortable myself knowing that, someone that has an addictive personality is now going to become addicted to alcohol because I decided to use my skills of marketing to convince them to pick up that bottle that they otherwise wouldn't have picked up.
So now you walk into these organizations, and how are you exercising your freedom of speech and now this newfound self-expression where you're like, I'm not going to stand for whatever doesn't fit my moral code? There's a stigma around, especially Black people at these tables, and we're already like, oh, they have an attitude or they're too aggressive, and we get and then you deal with these microaggressions. And
absolutely,
how do you navigate in those spaces and assert yourself in a way? Because I feel like a lot of us, even I, still need the answer of, even in emails, sometimes you're like, oh, you're coming off a little, and you're like, I didn't even say anything, and so you get boxed into these spaces. So how did you, what are the tactics that you've used, or even if they're not tactics, how are you approaching
For sure. Again, I always say God doesn't make mistakes, right? So I was raised in a very predominantly white environment for most of my youth. I was born and raised into it. So I had to learn how to code switch very early in my life. I had to learn what microaggressions are very early in my life. I had to learn how to deal with discrimination and deal with prejudice as a kid, from the playground, like when you're playing, games, on the playground and everybody's getting picked except for the Black kid, right? I was the Black kid, and I had to learn how to deal with that and not always show emotion of pain or hurt or anger, how to minimize all the external emotions that one feels, perfectly normal feelings, right? And then it doesn't help that, my parents being very, very African, everything is about, being strong and, not showing weakness and this, that, and the third. So when you have it's a double whammy, right? You go out to school, you're supposed to just be a kid. That freedom of being able to be a kid and not care about how the world looks at you. I wasn't afforded that. And it wasn't until I left where I was born and raised and started meeting a lot more Black people that shared those experiences, but weren't afforded the same comfortability of
Right.
being in a safer environment, you know, less, less crime, whatever it was, less security, and knowing that for them it's a means of survival to learn how to manage those things, because having the wrong opinion or speaking out of turn or just being at the wrong place at the wrong time could kill you. So I started meeting people like that and understanding, oh, so I'm not the only person dealing with it. It's just we're dealing with the same things in different ways.
Right.
Because someone doesn't have to take a gun out to kill you. And I learned that in corporate, right? All it takes is for one person to decide they don't like you, that's in a higher position of power, to end your career. So what happens when you accept a role working for someone? You're a woman, you're a black woman, and you work under someone that is not your color, but who has exerted their power or authority over you in a corporate environment. What happens? What do? Do you conform to what they ask you to do and continue to maintain your position or rise upon whatever ladder they've introduced you to, or do you say no and then become
the angry black woman.
ostracized, microaggressions,
Yeah.
you're problematic, they push you in a corner, and then boom, you're reorged out of your organization, right? So these are things that happen across corporate America, not just in tech, not just in, whatever. It's when you're working for an organization, you don't understand the politics, it can get really murky. And I think that a lot of people miss that. It's okay to be proud of who you are. It's okay to be black and proud and all these wonderful things. But at the end of the day, you gotta be careful, because it's not your company.
Right.
And a lot of people that run these companies and sit on these boards of these companies don't look like you and don't care about you at the end of the day. So people who don't look like you, whether they're Caucasian or not, are more have a freedom that unfortunately a lot of us aren't always afforded. And when you speak out and you try to change things, there's usually a cost that comes with that, especially if you're not very visible, especially if you don't have like any social equity outside of that organization. You could be pushed out and nobody would care.
And no one would care.
Right? So those are the things that I don't think people really think about when they ask people that are not as fortunate as maybe them or others who are in their positions to stand for causes that are literally bigger than them. These are $100 million, billion-dollar companies that, it's. I wish I could say so much more.
I know.
I wish I could say so much more. But I've seen people derail themselves and become derailed because they were standing up for something bigger than them.
Right.
And, cancel culture and all that stuff is definitely in vogue now. But what happens when all the chatter on social media has died down?
Yeah.
And nobody's caring about your cause anymore? Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna apply to that they're not gonna, remember that you were the one that was causing the trouble, you were the one that was rallying the troops.
Yeah.
And now they've all gone back to their regular lives, working wherever they're working for whatever organization they're working.
I'm proud of you, even if you don't feel proud of yourself. I'm proud of you because you came from a space where you were talking about the things that you're doing now. And I'm happy I was able to see your transition from then to now, and seeing that you're still standing your ground, and even
Absolutely.
now more than ever, because
Absolutely.
you are a seasoned vet in this.
You know what? And I'm trying to take all of that in stride, and I'm very grateful that I'm able to still stand and sit with friends like you who know what we deal with.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop. I think that my experiences have only helped me become the best version of myself to date, and I'm looking forward to the growth that's coming. It's the politics thing is always going to be what it is. You just have to be smart and navigate smart.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that anybody should just go to work every day and not try to change things for the better. Of course, I'm not saying that. I've been to organizations where I've put my neck on the line to make the organization better, and some have become better in my absence, right? But some won't change, because you have to remember who controls these organizations, right?
Yeah.
The same people paying your check are also paying, to support, policies and laws that literally are killing your people every day, locking your people up, destabilizing families every day. But if you're not aware or don't care, then of course you're not gonna be aware of these different things happening. So I just think that people should ask God for guidance every day, because you never know.
Right. And I always end here with the legacy question, because you're still building it, and I always say that, so you're still building it. We're in the middle of it. We're in the midst of it, and I know that every day, especially now, you're in the reset chapter of your life. Mm-hmm. And I want to know, what are people going to say that you taught them, that you encouraged them to do, that you inspired them to do? What are they going to say, like, oh, I'm pursuing this new thing in my life, and it's because of Tunde, and I saw his influence and all that. So what are you leaving behind for everyone?
Identity, ownership, mentorship, peace, awareness.
Sheesh.
Those are all the things that I want to be remembered for.
All of the most beautiful things.
I think that those have become the things most valuable to me right now. And if that changes in 5-10 years, cool. But right now, those are the core values to me right now. And I would hope that when all is said and done, if people wrote a book on my life, I would want those things to be the takeaways. That this person was passionate enough to put what he wanted aside so he could empower others. He cared about the mental health of people around him. He was aware of different things, even if it didn't necessarily benefit him, but if he could pass it on to others, boom. He understood the power of identity and the reverence of culture, and pushing it when you're in spaces that, especially when you're in spaces that aren't highly represented by people who look like you. Owning your stuff is important, especially as a content creator. Understanding the laws that protect you and the laws that work against you, depending on the context. Yeah, those are the things that I care about, and I really hope that, those who follow me and have always kind of known me in passing, that's what I would want people to take away from experiencing or being around me.
And I do believe that you're doing an amazing job at putting that out there.
Trying my best.
I've picked up all of that from you. You're so strong. And
it don't stop.
Yeah, thank you.
Onward and upward. Hey, y'all, this is Tunde, and you're tuned in with S.M.I.L.E Talks. I'm here with friend Leslia. Make sure you subscribe. Do what you do.
Yes, sir.
This has been great. Mm-hmm. Smile, it gets better.
You heard him. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was crazy.
Yes, he was.